Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the CAB call in April 2022. Definitely has been a year of a lot of progress in terms of what the community has achieved. And so I wanted to spend some time during this call just chatting generally about one specific project, which is named Korifi, which is our third iteration of putting Cloud Foundry on Kubernetes. It follows in the wake of CF for Gates, which was our previous iteration, and kubecf before that. But it also builds up on a lot of projects that were done, prior to that, in the form of Irene, in the form of Quarks, in the form of so many other uh, uh, pieces of engineering, which went into trying to sort of bridge Kubernetes and the Cloud Foundry capabilities. So there's a few things that I wanted to showcase today. Some of it technical. So we'll be doing like a walkthrough of how to do the installation. Hopefully the installation works okay and we're able to push an app or two and do like the complete life cycle. But also, I wanted to talk generally about where the project stands, what are the milestones that we're going for in terms of the first official release, and also, share some fun stuff like logos and other things, and how we are iterating around that. So, yeah, so I'm going to quickly share my screen. If I don't want to sound like a public service announcement, but if at all you see something, say something. So there might be some missteps that I make. There might be some parts of the README or the documentation that is missing, or there might be some errors that you spot. So just if there's something, please let us know. Obviously, I have my notes nearby for changes to some of these, but whatever you're able to add to that is much appreciated. So conveniently, the vision for CF is linked from the README. So this was done, I think, towards the end of the last year, and it was done with the intent of trying to sort of solidify uh, a vision for how Cloud Foundry should be presented on Kubernetes, and what's the best way to add value to something as popular as Kubernetes, and make a definitive push for the wonderful CF developer experience. Eric, do you want to add some information as to what the document is, and quickly summarize some of these points? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, hey, Ram. Yeah, sure. I can speak to this a little bit. So this is a document that we drafted with some folks, primarily from SAP and IBM, really in the first half of last year, laying out what we thought the productive pathway forward for Cloud Foundry and its concepts on top of Kubernetes would be, especially based on a lot of what we had learned from CF for Gates and kubecf. And so, I think the document's still there. There's a little bit of still commentary and discussion on it from when we were discussing it in the community last year. But what we really settled on is, we think that there's still a lot of value in these developer abstractions that we've built up in the CF community, over the past many years, not just applications and routing, but things like service brokers and service bindings. So continuing to present those interfaces and integrating those with the evolution of technologies like build packs and service brokering systems still seems very valuable, but wanting to integrate that more thoroughly with a lot of the resources that we see coming from Kubernetes, and ultimately making that more modular and extensible as an architecture in ways that both kubectf and CF4K really weren't designed to be. kubectf was really lifting the entirety of the whole BOSH-based architecture onto Kubernetes. And even CF4K, it was taking more steps to integrate kind of the back end with Kubernetes systems and taking advantage of what it could do around workload placement and different routing systems. But it was still fundamentally like taking that entire CF domain model and kind of lifting it onto Kubernetes and running it there. And I think both of those ways were they were a little bit like sugar highs in terms of we got a lot of activity and productivity very quickly, but then we started hitting more significant technical walls or integration walls, trying to integrate more deeply or more thoroughly with Kubernetes technologies. So that really motivated us stepping back and saying, like, what should this overall architecture start to look like? And how should we take more productive paths at developing that, even if it, in some cases, is going to take longer to iron out because of the modularity and interfaces that we need to build into it. And so this really spurred development starting in the second half of last year into what we're now calling the Korifi project. We've been kind of referring to with this CF on Kate's placeholder name, for lack of a better, more definitive term.
Thanks, Eric. So based on that, the idea that the folks had in terms of what this should look like and what this was designed to be is to be an API shim over Kubernetes. And it's part of the vision document and a bunch of other discussions as well. But yeah, here we are. And let's go through sort of the steps that have been outlined, try and get this installed on like a GKE cluster. Now, one of the historic difficulties that the community has been very vocal about is Cloud Foundry in the BOSH sort of version as well has not been the easiest to try out. So I think there are some projects like BOSH Lite and other things that try and make BOSH available on like systems that require lower compute resources and things like that. But more often than not, I've heard people say that it can be a little difficult to just have like a trial version that runs on low resources on a laptop, or and it particularly affects the ability to advocate this to like a bunch of different people, saying just try this out on your machine and it will work. And so one of the big changes that I've observed with this project is from the get-go, you have the ability to try this out on a kind cluster and it will work. Now, that was true of CF4K as well, but the focus hasn't been as much as it is right now. So kind clusters are a first-class citizen, and local development workflows are supported as as a first-class developer experience for this project. And so it's not recommended that you get like a big fat Kubernetes cluster in order to install this, but the installation steps are independent of what Kubernetes provider that you're using. So this should definitely work on other machines and things as well. So if you have 10 clusters, go for it. If you have some other preferred Kubernetes providers, go for it. The experience should necessarily be the same. So with that, let's get started. So the prerequisites are a very predictable list, I guess. So you obviously need kubectl. I've got that installed. Yes. And then compatible Kubernetes cluster. So, like I mentioned, this is a GKE cluster that I know. It's reasonably big, a container registry that you have write access for. So today we'll be making use of Docker and Docker Hub for this. Then again, it's expected to work with like other container registries as well. You obviously need the CFCLI, so I've got that installed as well. And there is a version that you need to keep in mind. Obviously, Helm is required for installing a few things, and that is here as well. So yeah, so that's all of the prerequisites. Um, the next step obviously is to clone this repo. So this is the official Cloud Foundry Korifi repo. So Korifi stands for a peak, like a mountain peak, and we decided to go Greek, keeping in mind that Kubernetes and Paketo and all of these um, projects are taking advantage of some of the words there. And so the community came together and voted for the name last month. So among the different ones that were shortlisted, I think Korifi had like the least amount of uh, trademark woes. So one of the others was Pharos, which stands for lightning, which was like very favored among the community. But unfortunately, there's I think like about 8 projects that's already named Pharos. Um, I don't recall the other one, which, but then the meaning stood for like a bridge between the heaven and the earth or something. So, which is also like a very interesting uh, name for a project that's trying to bind uh, apps between the Kubernetes world. So, anyhow, here we are. Korifi has been shortlisted. Korifi is the name that we're going for, and so again, this is the official sort of repo on GitHub. So if you want to follow along, if you want to test this by yourself, obviously, you know where to head to. So the first step is to clone that. I have, in the interest of saving time, cloned to a sandbox. So there's the repo, and the first steps are to install certain dependencies. Before we get into that, let me connect. Cluster, okay. Instructions say to deploy Korifi and run it in a cluster, you must first install cert manager. So there's two options for installing cert manager that are available. So there's a dependencies folder that comes within the repo. So all of the recommended versions of each of the different um, tools that you need are available here. So obviously you can either apply that directly or you can fetch from like the source um, and apply that. So I'm just, I prefer doing like the dependencies that come with it. So let me do that. And while that's happening, we can monitor cluster on K9s. Okay. So as we start to sort of work with the cluster and populate it, you see different pods and other things. Some of these steps take longer than the others. So I will try and fill the silence with my commentary as best as I can. But also maybe take advantage of some of the others who are here from like the Korifi team, Korifi working group. Tim, do you want to maybe give us a little background on what the cert manager does here?
The cert manager here is used for provisioning the self-signed certs that are validating and mutating webhooks used with the Kubernetes API. So when you create certain resources on it, the Kubernetes API is going to call out to these webhooks, and it wants to do that over TLS. So we have to get certs somehow, and cert manager provisions those.
Thanks, Tim. KPAC is next. I think folks in this group will be quite familiar with what KPAC is and what it can and cannot do. So awesome. So let's KPAC. Parts are ready. The next thing that the installation steps recommend is to alter these secrets for which image registry that you're going to use. So there's like a bunch of different images that get created that get copied over and other things as part of both the app creation workflows and as part of the installation workflow and other things as well. So the installation and other parts require access to like a registry, a container registry, and so it's recommended that folks alter the tag parameter in this YAML. So, which I think I've already done. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to pause my screen share for a minute, just to make sure that I'm not sharing any credentials live. Yeah, this is so like I said, we're using Docker here. So there was like a previous tag that I've replaced the Docker version. So Next, you're going to create a secret which will allow access to that particular container registry. Now, even in the past with CF4 gates, we've documented the use of like several uh, container registries, and so I guess it's just an extension of that. So again, because this exposes passwords and things, I'm going to pause screen share for a while, and I'm going to just run this secret very quickly. So yeah, I've run this command to create the secrets, and then now I'm just going to apply this information that will provide like a bunch of different things for KPAC to successfully namespace CF not found. Okay. Oops. Okay. Yeah, there is a step afterwards, I think, that configures the namespace. Maybe I'll try running this once. Okay. So next step is about contour and envoy. I think at the end of this step, the envoy and contour get created here, and those pods will allow us to apply the right kind of ingress, and it will give us that static IP, which we can then make use of to access the cluster. Let's just wait until all pods get created. If folks have questions, you can just shout those out. Make use of chat. I don't think people are strangers to each other. So in this step, we're going to be able to find that public IP and then make use of that public IP to access the cluster. So just going to quickly make note of this. We refer it in other places. So let's see. So here instead of the default, we're going to have this nip.io is just a wildcard DNS service, and it will help us arrive at this IP by making use of it as like a domain and things. So I'm going to skip this part about assigning a domain, because we're not going to make use of one for purposes of this demo. Obviously, when you're making use of this in other contexts and things, you know, you kind of need to assign a domain. So probably do that in like a follow-up demo somewhere in here. The next step is to install IDE. So sure. Yep. Yeah, thanks, Tim. I was assuming just as much. So we move on to creating a namespace for IDE, and then create one for CF workloads as well. And then what's another step that we go through? That's 0. Set this is will install IDE on the cluster, which lot application notices and warnings, but IDE controllers are installed. Okay. Some more certificate stuff. Be good. Let's create that secret. Okay. All right. So then we come to hierarchical namespaces. Now, this specific set of instructions, I think, point to like an older version. So let's install the 1.0 version. So just by way of background, hierarchical namespaces are sort of the tool that's going to help with orgs and spaces. And so what we do is install like the latest version. So there's two parts to the installation. One that we apply to the Kubernetes cluster, and one is like a local manager, HNC manager of sorts. So let's install this. There'll be an HNC pod that gets created. It's going to assist with orgs and namespaces and maintain that hierarchically as a one-on-one mapping. So these are again some of the changes that are very apparent from the start between what we've observed with like previous iterations of CF and Kubernetes. So there wasn't like a very good one-to-one correspondence between orgs and workspaces and all of these previously. There was one, I think, CF workloads namespace that had everything. And this time, a lot of effort has gone into recreating the same kind of mapping between Kubernetes native ways of organizing these namespaces and the Cloud Foundry method of organizing these namespaces. The other area where there's a lot of change and what has become very Kubernetes native is also the authentication and RBAC. We'll get to that, in due course, but I just wanted to mention this. So there's also like I mentioned, a plugin that needs to be installed locally. So we're going to do that as well. Downloads the right version. Yeah, and I'll show you what the mapping looks like, Wayne. So there's a hash, and it basically makes use of like a prefix to that hash, but the hash is basically what differentiates different um, orgs and different spaces that we create. Um, all right. So let's make sure it's working. Yep, help text should be displayed. All right. So we got through that. We'll obviously update the README as soon as we get a chance. So we're just going to do a command that propagates some sequence that are required. There is an optional step here for installing service bindings. Obviously, if anything is prefixed with optional, I'm going to skip for today. So let's see. Asks us to create like a root namespace. Let's do that. There's a couple of things that have to be matched. So like the kpack image tag is similar to the one that we did before. Just apply the Docker URL here. This is also applying the Docker URL. And let's see. I'm going to have to remember to run this once again, I guess. Okay, so like a kpack service account is being created. One of these. Yeah, I guess that's it. So wish me luck. So there's a make deploy command that basically does the final deployment. Again, some of these config changes I did before the call, just in the interest of time. So there's going to be two pods that come up. So the control plane, the controller system part, and then there's going to be like the Korifi API part. So both of those basically get deployed at this stage, and those are the ones that we're going to be using. So let's see. Post deployment says create one here. I will create it. I'm going to pause screen share, I guess, one last time. Need to create like a secret console. Okay. Create that interest. The second secret. Apply that. All right, so now I should be able to say Yeah. Um,
Did you create 2 secrets or just 1?
I created 2.
Okay. You could look at the HTTP proxy in that Korifi API system and see if it's unhealthy.
Um, yeah. No, I don't think the
What does the in that Kube API system namespace, there should be an HTTP proxy resource type. Yeah, that one. It says it's valid. If you open it, does it have anything?
I think, yeah, I think we missed a step where we have to change one of these labels.
The FQDN on it doesn't match. Yeah.
Correct. Um, so do I have to like change it here, right?
Yeah. That external FQDN should match what you're using.
Right.
And then there's also another file, like a I don't remember the name, but it's in that same API config directory that you'll want to change to point at the new one. I dropped it in Zoom chat. It's an API config base API URL patch. That's the more important one, actually.
Okay.
That's the one that is used to template out that contour configuration.
Why doesn't that exist?
I think because you're already nested. If you go up a directory, then you can, yeah, just edit that one. So this one, if you point to your new domain, I think it will work. And then just like make deploy again to apply it.
Just so I change it only at one place, right?
Yeah, we should, if you actually want a push to be functional, We have to change it in that other file too, but if you just make deploy right now, it will at least let you target the API, and we'll see if everything else is set up. So that file is used for the actual routing. The other one informs the API about what its base URL needs to be for like redirects and stuff that it gives to the CF CLI.
Got it. Yep. Yeah. CF. So Wayne, just to answer the question that you had earlier, this is the way namespace anchors are organized. So if I create another org here, then it will get CF org and another hash. So this is the magic that hierarchical namespace, those HNC things are created. So sub namespace anchors are what make this happen. So CF. And then so spaces also get created within these orgs. So the namespace now is the older, I guess the older org, and so we're there now. Yeah, that's that was a fun install process, I guess. Is the CF push thing going to work, Tim, or do we need that configuration to change?
If you want CF push to work, that original config file you're at, you need to change all those example.coms to refer to this domain.
Okay.
And then you'll also need to set up a CF domain, unless you want to push with the no route flag. But otherwise it will fail and say you need a domain to be able to create a route.
Okay, so I'm not even going to bother trying. So maybe that can be on the CAB call for me. But yeah, that's the install process. I think we got some good feedback in terms of any changes to the documentation and other things as well. But it works. It works. It works. It works. And just some quick other things, like I mentioned, we have, I guess, a bunch of different logos, and people can jump in and say which they like, which they don't. See if users required to auth using key users. Are there other places where awareness of Kubernetes bleeds over into the CF experience? I think the important parts, Brett. So if folks are able to see this question from Brett, he's asked if there's any awareness of Kubernetes that crosses over into the CF experience. I think the big places are in auth, and then it's been sort of become more closely resembling the Kubernetes experience for workspaces, the namespaces, and how we organize orgs and spaces in general. So I have not seen any other places. Again, Tim, do you want to sort of take this question?
Yeah, sure. So like, I'll just focus on auth. The answer is yes. So the shim is not doing any auth on its own. It's actually delegating everything to the Kubernetes API. And it's backed entirely by Kubernetes custom resources. So like, the CLI is talking to the shim, which implements the Cloud Foundry APIs based on those, but you don't have to use that. Like you could use kubectl directly and make like a CF app resource, CF build to trigger staging and everything. And that inherently requires that you have a user that is somehow recognized by the Kubernetes API. But the Kubernetes like auth system is very extensible too. So there's like projects that have like auth proxies that can like delegate to external auth systems and stuff. So like theoretically, you could hook up a UAA or something that Kubernetes is delegating to for your user management. It's just with Korifi and the shim, we're not caring how that happens. It's just like as long as the Kubernetes API trusts your user and can apply its RBAC rules against it, then stuff will work. Does that make sense? Cool. And there's like benefits to this too. So like rather than Cloud Controller being the like sole gatekeeper of auth here, all the decisions are made by just like regular Kubernetes RBAC. So like we have a space developer role and a CF admin role that we're using, but this makes it much more extensible where people can make custom roles that apply to the resources they want without having to like go down like months-long effort of updating Cloud Controller to acknowledge that that role exists.
Cool. Any other questions that folks have? We can take them here. If not, CF Gates Dev, I believe, is the right Slack channel. So feel free to post there. Although I think that will soon have to be renamed to Korifi to reflect the right sort of. So yeah, we're at a point where we are figuring out like a bunch of cosmetic stuff with logos and other things as well. But the project has, generally speaking, matured a lot in the past few months. Obviously, big credits to the CF One Gates working group, the Korifi working group, for making that happen. Generally speaking, the Korifi release is what we are looking forward to the most this year. So, it's a very key project in terms of its utility overall, and for positioning Cloud Foundry as an important part of the Kubernetes ecosystem for the future. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Tim, for all of the support. Again, if folks have questions, follow up on Slack. If this call is going to be being recorded, it will be available on YouTube tomorrow. So I'll share a link to that as well. So if there are folks you feel might be interested in learning a little bit more about this, feel free to share that as well. And this is obviously going to be like a big PR and marketing push. So hopefully you'll hear a lot more about the whole project. But yeah, that's it for now. Thanks everybody. Thanks Ashley for recording.
Thank you.
I think so. That was great.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.